Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Socializing Security. We are glad to have you here. I'm also glad to be here live with Milu. How are you, Milu?
I'm doing well. How are you, Brian?
Good. Excited for today's conversation. Another great guest, someone that comes with some history with us. So, Milu, why don't you kind of give us an intro as to who we're going to be talking to this week?
Yeah, this week we're going to be chatting with Frank Arriaga, the founder and principal photographer of HMO Studios, a photography and videography shop out of the Houston area. Frank is actually a former coworker of Brian and I, so we definitely have a past life and history together, working on different sides of the business, but very closely nonetheless. And we're bringing Frank in today to talk about, he has a very strong background as a technologist in technology sales for cloud hosting, specifically with disaster recovery solutions for customers and architecting that. And now we're kind of thinking through, what does that disaster recovery background look like as a small business owner, specifically when we're talking about somebody who does photography and videography, where data loss is a huge risk to the business. And I'm excited to kind of talk to him about what he has planned for his clients and how he handles this.
Yeah, definitely interested to hear kind of Frank was on one side of the table and now he's on the other side of the table, which in my career, I've done that several times, going from the customer side to the sales kind of partner side to the actual vendor side of the fence. So it's kind of interesting to see the different sides of the table and hear people's experience on what they thought it was, what they find it actually is. In some ways, the direction he went can be kind of dangerous to those technology sales companies and people because, holy cow, this guy knows all the tricks that we're going to play on him. So yeah, I'm excited to hear from Frank what he's seen on the other side, and I know he's seen some real world scenarios. As you mentioned, living in Houston, there's been some weather related situations that he's had to deal with. So I know we'll get into that as well. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to him. And he actually was part of what inspired Socializing Security. So we can credit him for this initiative of helping inspire us to start recording and really, bringing thought leaders in to start socializing security.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, should we bring him on?
Yeah. And here we are with Frank. Hi, Frank. Welcome.
Hi, Milo. Thank you for having me. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Frank. Glad you could make it.
Of course. I find this podcast inspirational and everyone should listen to it.
Well, thank you. We did mention in our intro that, we do have to credit this idea to you. So we really appreciate you kind of being the inspiration between kind of getting us excited about starting to do this.
Well, it takes a seed, but then it takes people to actually plant it, water it, and see it grow into something great. So you guys deserve all the credit, really.
Well, yeah, we're really looking forward to our conversation today. So as we had kind of mentioned, we're definitely starting to talk about how you're protecting your business when we're thinking about disaster recovery and building out, when you're thinking about being in the photography and videography space, obviously data is king. And the idea of losing somebody's most memorable photographs is disastrous. And so we would love to just start to hear about what is the strategy you took with HMO Studios of starting to build out what it looks like to create your data backup plan and making sure that you're prepared for different scenarios.
And I'll start out by briefly introducing a little bit of the experience I've had. So I was a marketing director at an emergency room, as well as a salesperson and account manager at a cloud service company. So I'm very, very familiar with compliance, maintaining your data, and ensuring the systems are up and running. Those are mission critical businesses. And a lot of people think that photographers don't have that, but we actually do, because there are a lot of topics like copyright law, compliance for minors, distribution of data, where you're going to be printing the images, who has access to those images, what can go on Instagram because of their TOCs, what cannot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I've been very lucky to have been able to work with people like both of you who shaped me into this little crazy guy that thought, okay, I'm going to start this company, but I also know a lot about compliance, and we're going to do that from the ground up. So when I started thinking about HMO stands for Hear Me Out Studios. And the main reason I went for Hear Me Out Studios was because I need to communicate to people how important data privacy is, not only in terms of, their own copyright and how their images could be used, how their content could be used, how I protect them from other people utilizing their image to, for example, profit for their business, and all those other things. So we really have a conversation the day of the shoot about what makes you comfortable, get people warmed up, etc. But before any of that happens, it's very important for us to explain to them why we need a contract, what it applies to, what it protects you from, and most importantly, what the customer's expectations are from a data privacy standpoint and from a data retention standpoint. Some customers, forever data retention. That's something that we can do. Some customers want copyright for 1 year for their business. Some customers want copyright perpetual. So we have different plans, but we obviously have to back it up by service contracts, audits, a great MSP that helps us out. And I was able to cultivate all these ideas from having worked at my previous companies and learned from a lot of great mentors, in that data protection is important, and you don't want to hit the wall running, so to speak, when something happens.
As you talk about the fact that you used to sell those types of solutions, and now you are a consumer of those types of solutions, you have to be the person that has to talk to your old self in some ways and have that conversation, and then decide which of them you're going to go with. What's that like, being on the other side of the table? Because I've made that transition a few times, and I'm always curious how other people kind of interpret that change of perspective.
Yeah, it's really eye-opening, because the first time you do it, you think you know what you're doing because you've sold so many things, etc. Right? But when you internalize it and you start to think about not only the protection of your customers, but the protection of your business as well, especially since we have so many legislative agendas coming up, as well as already frameworks put in place for that, we have to be very conscious about that stuff. So for me personally, I approached the business with a similar approach to how tech companies handle accessibility, right? I believe that every application, every operating system, everything humans interact with should have accessibility built in from the ground up. Now, that accessibility can be great because it can mean that somebody who can't talk can suddenly have Siri previously record their voice and then speak as if they were perfectly normal. Now, the balance is accessibility for us versus over accessibility. So we want to make sure we give everybody accessibility, understanding of where their data is, what security measures are put in place, what redundancy is put in place. But at the same time, we want to make it easy for them to be able to get that information in a quickly manner, and also have good communication, not only with us, but with vendors that we utilize. Because at the end of the day, like any other company, we leverage other vendors to take care of certain things. And it's important for us to pass down those reports, just as important as it is for them to give those reports to us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so when you were building out your strategy, when you're thinking around how do you make sure that you have sufficient copies, and what was your approach when you were thinking about building out your like data backup strategy and planning? Is that something that you've outsourced, or is it something you've taken on internally?
Absolutely internal. And I'll give you two reasons. One, I am a startup. So when we're talking about shooting with 68 plus megapixel cameras, 8K video, things like that, data storage costs in the cloud are still prohibitive to most people that run independent businesses. Applaud those who can, but the reality is that these data sets and these files need to be readily accessible to us because we edit, we're always on the go. Sometimes we have tight deadlines, and we can't always wait for cold storage or tape or whatever the cheapest option is out there. So our approach was to get rid of the 3-2-1 idea, because that does not exist in the photography world. We have production data on SSDs that's being worked on. We have the local NAS, which also has an SSD cache. It brings up my electric bill quite a bit. And at the same time, we have in-house backup that basically updated at a certain frequency and then kept offline, just to make sure that we have something on hand at the moment for a deadline. And then additionally, we went ahead and partnered with QNAP, and we have mirroring QNAPs both here in Houston, Texas, where we're based out of, and in San Antonio as well. That allows us through AT&T to have synchronous copies of the data. And of course, QNAP has really great tools for security that are audited by our MSP. And it helps me sleep at night, because when you're selling somebody their wedding photographs, anything can happen. We just got hit by a massive hurricane. It took my power out for 10 days. Someone could have had their house flooded and destroyed all their computers, all their files, all their photos. You cannot redo a wedding. And coming from a background in disaster recovery scenario, I thought, this can't happen. This will be the nail in the coffin for us. So for the very get-go, it was a bit of a challenge, but I got my partner to really invest in this, because you need to have that resiliency and you need to manage it well. You need to keep it up to date, and you need to honor the SLAs that you put on a contract, just like the client does.
Yeah, and I'm assuming it's probably a fairly marketable service that you're providing there to go to, potential customers, to go to potential clients and say, I'm going to give you the quality work. Like, that's obviously the most important thing, is to have quality work that, doesn't suck. And also to be able to say, but I also be able to give you these things around protecting it. Like, not everyone's good at managing digital files. Some people don't know what to do with it. I know that storing pictures on a CD is not a good way to archive your pictures. I've lost pictures because of that. And despite being very careful with them, storing them in a safe, like, it's not guaranteed that's going to come back. I've learned those lessons the hard way. And I guess ultimately what it kind of comes down to is, now you can go to those customers and say, we've invested in this because this is how we want to differentiate. This is how we want to provide you a service beyond just really good photos that will print for you, and we'll give you a bunch of, we'll give you a big manila envelope full of pictures, but we've got them backed up. And if you do have that fire, you do have that flood, you can come to us and we'll be able to reprint them for you if you wanted.
Of course. And it's not only people, it's businesses. A lot of businesses have us record things for them to make money off of advertisements and other things. That falls into copyright law. And a lot of the times, the marketing folks over there just want web-ready assets. Give me the JPEG that's super compressed. Give me this, give me that. What we offer is 8K recording, for example. That might not be useful today, but 10 years ago, we were still shooting with 1 megapixel cameras. So time changes, and if they're buying a perpetual copyright and all of a sudden they realize, hey, you know what? We have that 8K file backed up. We paid for that. We don't need to redo the shoot. Then it pays out dividends on the long run, right?
Yeah.
So that's just one example, but there's certainly other use cases we have for that outside of helping businesses, particularly when it comes to families. I'm sure you've all heard of those examples where somebody passes away. Maybe they had their iPhone locked. If they were super geeky, they had their iCloud encrypted as well, like me. So being able to access that is impossible unless you know the Apple ID or the master passkey. And with us backing that up, we can include in the contract secondary or third people who may be able to access them in the case of somebody passing away or somebody having an accident. And that can completely transform someone's loss. It's not something that I wish for anybody, but it can help. And if we can help, I think that differentiates us.
Yeah, it's an idea about creating like beneficiaries for some of your most sensitive or like coveted data. Obviously, like there's things that you can do in terms of managing beneficiaries and account access and stuff and making sure you do have those trusted parties. But I love the idea of pulling that into your business plan of being like, hey, actually, like in the case, we prefer not to just have one primary contact. We want to make sure that in the case that something happens, you lose your backup, you can't reach us, whatever, somebody else reaches out, whether that's for a couple, it being two people, or for family, making sure you have at least a secondary or tertiary contact to get that information, I think is a really interesting like type of, also, again, business continuity planning really ties into our discussion today, but it's an interesting thought when we're talking about things and services that people might actually need access to. It's not uncommon for people to have just suddenly lost their files, or they just can't find those photos for whatever reason. They just got a new laptop or whatever, and they just cannot figure out where they stored it. And so, making sure that they can reach out, but also have other people reach out on their behalf, I think is a powerful thing that you're putting in place.
Yeah, and it's also beneficial for businesses because we do yearly checkups and we want to make sure that the information is accurate and they still want that person to have those privileges. Now, some people may be very specific and want that to be more frequent. That's a contract, right? But it's also an upsell opportunity for when we call and we say, hey, we want to make sure all your contacts are okay. Also, how's your dog doing? I bet he would look great now that he's no longer a puppy. So yeah. Everybody wins when you have that kind of plan in place.
Yeah, and a lot of this kind of end of life planning, emergency type planning, it's all disaster planning. It may not be business continuity, but it is somewhat of a life continuity thing, and plays into what you talked about. Hey, here's how we protect the data, and if things hit the fan, this is what we're going to do. Which those of us in the IT space are used to thinking in those terms. And one thing that I like to push people on is that, cool, you figure out your IT systems, you figure out your security systems. What about the people? Where are the people going to go? Where are the people in accounting? How are they accessing these systems that you've now resurrected from the dead? How are your customers going to know that something's going on if you don't have your email system up and running? How is, if you're a large consumer-based company, how do you let the public know that something's going on? There's no lack of examples that we could share about major outages, major cyber attacks that have resulted in good and poor communications to the public. Of course, there's government entities that sometimes get played into that. So for you in your business, you're working with, you mentioned an MSP, you mentioned clients that you're talking to on the regular. Maybe talk a little bit how you think about these external pieces and how you bring those into that overall plan that's not necessarily technical.
Sure. So from an MSP standpoint, for example, we have a very clear split between customer data and business data. Those never exist in the same systems. They never exist in the same network. They never exist in the same space. So that is a way for us to ensure that we are able to maintain our business continuity while at the same time protecting our customers' content without risking a attack on one side or another. The more you sparse it out, the better. And secondly, by bringing in experts like both of you and learning from them, if I could afford you both, you would be working for me, trust me. But being able to leverage these things and being able to leverage all the information out there that's online, that's publicly available. Heck, you could go and get hired at a big cybersecurity firm and learn a lot of this stuff if you're very eager to, just by copying what other people do and understanding business practices and the protocols that go with it. So it's very important for you to always absorb anything you can get. I don't like to say I steal ideas and I steal ways of doing things, but
that's totally okay in this space.
If it isn't broken, I'm going to use it. And Hear Me Out Studios is abbreviated HMO, which is something that can't be copyrighted because it's an insurance. It's a medical insurance thing. So good luck, HBO. But everything is, you have to think about it that way. You have to think the before, the now, and then the after. And by combining partners and making sure that we vet them appropriately and we communicate our needs and we listen to them is going to be the key to our success. And just how I ask people to hear us out, aka our name, I also hear people out when they tell me that something could be done a little bit different, or maybe this has to go into another VLAN or whatever the case may be. I'm not trying to get very technical here, but all those things matter. And at the end of the day, what we love to do here is create content, create photography, videos, capture weddings, go to concerts, races. We just did a equestrian show the other day. That was really cool. Horses are super sweet. Give them a carrot, they'll love you for life. But yeah, all of it ties in at the end of the day to security and redundancy, as well as having things in place. So if there's a hurricane, I know to let my customers know we will be rescheduling all the shoots. And we're a local company, so most people do not want to take pictures in the middle of a hurricane, right? So less affected. But at the same time, we still have to communicate that, and we still have to communicate if there was any data loss, if there was any data corruption, if there are any files that we won't be able to retrieve. That's never happened, knock on wood. But that's why when I started this company, I put all those things into the business plan because I wanted to make sure that I was ready for it. Most companies learn it the hard way. They get hit by ransomware or something else. They end up paying a lot more out of pocket instead of investing initially into what's important. And you could take $1 million photograph, but if it disappears, it's not worth anything anymore.
Yeah, I think coming up with the business planning and just making sure that you thought through what redundancy and security looks like for your business at the outset, I think is a huge advantage. Just also, you understand the risk, right? I think given your technology background, like as a technologist, you understood it probably more than most, but understanding that you built that plan ahead of time, that you've come up with customer communications, regular reporting, and you have that plan that you feel comfortable with and that you've supported with external partners, I think is huge. I think also that just understanding of like making sure you have a clear way to talk to your people and making sure that, even if you've lost power, right, they might experience delays with getting their deliverables and stuff like that from you. So I think just coming through with that plan. And I also love what you said of just like relying on existing resources and making sure that you're doing the research as a business owner to feel like you're prepared, and that, you're using templates that already exist, and making sure that you're thinking through some of the business scenarios are huge. Because again, a lot of this stuff is unfortunately done after the fact, or they've lost something and they're like, oh no, our backup strategy wasn't working.
Yeah. And I will give credit to my previous employer, who was very keen on us listening to what happened. And I dealt with hundreds of small businesses that never even thought about this, never even considered it after being in business for 10 years. And suddenly it's a catastrophe. And I don't know if Hear Me Out Studios was going to be HBO in 20 years. I hope so. But if we do, I don't want to get to year 12 and suddenly kaput. I need to call a DR company and they're going to tell me, well, you should have had this put in place the first time around. So definitely.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the silver linings of this current security space that we are with ransomware all over the place, is that it is front page news. It is something that the layperson outside of the IT and security space are hearing these days and can't avoid knowing about at this point. So hopefully it at least makes them think about the fact that, hey, these things can happen. But then at the same time, there's always been heavy coverage of natural disasters destroying entire buildings and taking everything away. Sometimes I wonder, people that don't hear those messages in those types of disasters, what hope they have at that point, because it's a scary thing. I've watched a lot of businesses get hit by that kind of stuff, and we've had natural disasters here local to me where we've gone out and helped with cleanup activities, and it affects you in ways you can't predict. Seeing someone else, they've lost everything. Like you're literally helping them dig through the stuff, trying to find what's worth keeping and what's going to throw away, and the pile of throwaway is way bigger than the pile of keep.
Yeah. And Brian, you brought up a good point. Disasters could be climate caused or institutionally caused, etc. However, you also have to vet all the different platforms that you're using. So I'll give you an example. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, you name it. All of them have terms and service conditions, and you need to be very careful when you post certain things to make sure that you're not violating your own service agreement with the customer. B, you have permission to do that. And then C, you have to protect your own assets from being able to, let's say, get copied and pasted and used as an asset for generative AI. I think that was in one of the other podcasts. I think it was, I can't remember the episode, but you spoke about generative AI, and a lot of that is taking assets that are existing in the internet and utilizing them. And, that could be a disaster as well, because you could take an insane picture and somebody could use generative AI to put a little star here, a star there, and boom, they sell it. They make $10,000 more than you did. And that's something you want to be aware of. And a lot of people ask me, why is the Instagram or these accounts so limited? And to be honest with you, a lot of people really care about their privacy right now. A lot of people do not want their information shared outside of their own private accounts or private circles. And we have to honor that. And this is something that's even in our employee handbook. As we get B photographers, C photographers, et cetera, for larger events, they need to understand that even though they may have taken a great picture, it doesn't mean it can go on any side of the internet, because that's a disaster of its own.
Yeah, data leakage, regardless of whether it was a cyber attack or not, is the same thing. ultimately to your business and to your customers' businesses and or lives.
I think that'll kick me off into kind of our closing question, but I will just say it's refreshing to hear that we're getting a lot of people that are very concerned about their privacy, because I feel like we in the market are seeing a lot more just like that we're kind of getting used to all being impacted by breaches, and we're seeing less of a prioritization of privacy, which again is kind of where this conversation that happened with the CTO that I like to ask our guests of, I had a CTO recently tell me that he thinks that the fight for privacy is dead and that now it's really the fight for security. And, given your unique background, specifically with the type of people that are asking like, hey, I don't actually want you to share my photos, where do you feel like we are with this? Is the fight for privacy dead, or is it still well and alive?
It's definitely alive. People want their privacy, especially when it comes to children, when it comes to their families, personal events. We do birthday parties for kids, for example. There are other parents there who also have privacy concerns. I do not think privacy is dead at all. I think, in fact, it's actually married to security and it's married to compliance. It's one of those things you can't separate. As much as you want to say privacy is dead, then you might as well run an ad against Apple. But it's not going to work because people actually care.
That's refreshing to hear. Definitely refreshing to hear that you feel that strongly, and talking more on the consumer side than our typical guest is. To hear people say that, yeah, we want you to protect these photos because of privacy is awesome to hear. So really appreciate that answer, Frank.
But if you want your baby to be photographed and to be on every Gerber container in the world, I'm more than happy to take the picture, post it on Instagram, but just don't sue me. And we'll be okay. Sue Gerber.
Cool.
All righty. Well, I think this was a great conversation. I really appreciate both of you for having me on the show. I'm excited to see future episodes and keep up to date with everything.
Thank you so much, Frank. And if people want to get in contact with you and learn more about HMO Studios, how should they do that?
Yeah, there's the best way to do it is to go to hmostudios.com and you can fill out a form. You can call the phone number that we have listed. You can view some of the pictures that we're able to share. And we are more than happy to get in touch with you, whether you're in Dallas, Houston, or Austin. We serve essentially the entire state of Texas today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the conversation. We really appreciate it. And we definitely want to keep posted to see what you're doing and follow along with your journey.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, Frank.
Of course.
Well, that was a great conversation, Milo. It was, of course, I think a pleasure for both of us just to catch up with Frank after a few years not working together. But I guess what were your impressions on all we talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to hear what he's doing at HMO Studios, and just obviously, like, it's cool to hear somebody from our world who's kind of transitioned into something new, and hearing from that.
Yeah.
But also like building off of his background in disaster recovery and cloud, and understanding like why security is so important, and using that kind of as his like differentiator with his clients. I think, especially where I think there might be opportunities for him to occasionally educate people on like privacy practices and also like secure data storage and redundancy and stuff. And I think that was like really great to hear that he's using his background, and he hasn't forgotten his security training. I'll say that.
Don't forget where you come from type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good. We oftentimes, being the practitioners, oftentimes get viewed as the Department of No, or being lectured or lecturing the people that we have to work with. Where people tend to learn these things the most is where they learn them from their peers. And at the risk of bringing in too much of a personal story here, my wife doesn't always listen to me when I talk about security and privacy and stuff. But man, when she hears it from one of her, a couple podcasts that she listens to, or hears it on Good Morning America, those types of things have more of an impact. It's like, you won't believe the conspiracy theory from the nut job that lives down the street, but the normal person that lives next door talks about something more complex like a conspiracy theory, you might more likely to believe them. So having somebody like Frank out there being, hey, I'm not a security professional, I don't sell DR services anymore, but I used to, and here's why me protecting your pictures, here's me protecting the videos and the property and value that I'm creating for you, I will protect them for you, is a huge market thing for him to be able to go out there and differentiate.
Yeah, for sure. Because so many other like photographers, videographers, normally the expectation is very much on the client to being like, you are fully responsible for data storage
100%.
and your redundancy and all that. And if you don't immediately download it, like you're SOL. So I think, it was interesting to hear that for certain clients, he's actually like building that into his service offering, that he's like, actually like I'll retain copies and stuff, especially like on some of the corporate accounts and stuff. I think it's just like interesting to hear about that. And also just to think through like, what is the backup plan, right? For anybody in terms of like natural disasters, system outages, or like, the worst case where, a file is corrupted and you just lose it. I think that's happened to all of us at some point or another. And so I think thinking through like what he recommends to his clients and also making sure they're being mindful of it, but he's also like making sure that he's protected, that, whatever his contracts say, right? I'm sure he's still maintaining a backup, if I had to guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think an important through line in all that was he put a strong focus on planning. And I think that's important for everything that we do, because you can't just throw a product out on market and then, let's go check the compliance boxes now that we're already selling the thing. You can't go out there and, build that big giant SaaS system and then bring clients onto it and say, it's probably time for us to start locking it down. You've got to plan those things from the beginning. And that's the thing I think I love most about Frank's story, is that he has taken these lessons and applied them from the very beginning. He was very mindful about making sure they were included.
Yeah, for him, compliance is a no-brainer, which we love.
Yep. Friend of the family, friend of the podcast.
Well, we're really grateful for the time he spent with us, and we're excited to see his success with HMO Studios.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll keep checking in on him and bring him in as part of our Socializing Security family, and we hope you all will join us online as well to continue these types of conversations. Feel free to reach out to us at info@socializingsecurity.com and let us know what else you want to talk about. I know some of the things that we talked about with Frank are already on our list to talk deeper about. So lots more to come at you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.